Welcome back. This is Sansad TV, where we are doing these special shows today on Interim Budget Day. We're getting a chance to speak to some of the most influential economic thinkers in the country and the people who've drafted not just the interim budget or given insights into it, but also, of course, drafting the economic policies of what is the fastest growing major economy in the world and soon to be the third largest economy in the world. And it's a real pleasure to welcome right here into the studio Mr. Ajay Seth, who's of course Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs at the Finance Ministry. So great to have you with us. Just wanted to get your sense, Mr. Seth, on where you think the economy is actually poised. We've got a lot of it, both from the interim budget speech and the economic review. How good a shape are we in?
We are in fairly good shape, and past 3 years, 7%, average more than 7% growth. Even the coming year, 24-25, we expect 7% will be a reasonable estimate. Public finances, thanks to the efforts of these 2-3 years, post-pandemic, public finance did had a lot of borrowings, and those were obvious reasons. Thereafter, government has stuck to the path of faster fiscal consolidation. It kept its capex high, and that is a clear shift I see in public expenditure, that extra borrowing was used except for the year 2021, which was a pandemic year. Thereafter, whatever space could be created, and significant space went into capital expenditure. And that is always adds to the capacity into the economy. Moving forward, the challenges are somewhat different. Is 7% is a good growth rate? Yes, it is. Do we need to more? Certainly. So question is, how do we increase the potential of the economy to talk about 7% plus, in spite of what happens in the rest of the globe?
I think you framed it really well, and I'm just going to take us back, if I can, 2 years or
Sure.
2.5 years ago. Pandemic, as the pandemic was easing, and a lot of discussion was happening on the policies. I think I recall meeting you at that time, and a lot of people, including journalists, were at that time pressurizing the government and saying, you should have a demand-side stimulus. Look at the rest of the world. Everyone's doing a demand-side stimulus. Why is India not doing it? And everyone was somewhat bemused to have the government standing its ground and saying, no, we're going to do supply side. We're going to invest in infrastructure. We're going to remove some of the supply side bottlenecks, and we're not going to go for a major demand stimulus. Are we now really seeing the fruits of those particular decisions?
Certainly, and if I were to see that the fruits of these resilience, from where it has it come by opening some lock? No, it has happened because successive years, very fundamental reforms have been put in. If you can recall it, getting the banking sector and the financial sector in good health. And it took good 4 to 5 years to get the balance sheets of the banks right. First, acknowledging the problem that there are NPAs. I'm not getting into what led to those NPAs, but repairing that balance sheet. At the same time, creating conditions for those who want to get into the financial markets per se, make it easier, and technology has helped them getting into the financial markets, increasing those efficiencies, increasing the governance factors. Getting into using the way DPIs have been used, digital public infrastructure as an instance. It becomes very easy to talk about so many crore transactions are happening. But what is the volume? Volume is of the order of 180 lakh crore in a year. If the entire transactions were to be done by cash, cost would have been about 5%. That much money somebody is saving. People are saving because people don't have to go to a bank or go to an ATM and draw cash. Banks don't have to spend money to replenish those ATMs, kind of a thing. These are the reforms using the technology, getting the governance systems in right. That has put the resilience into the economy. Thereafter, for 1 year, and that I clearly recall that debate happening. I was not in Government of India at that point of time. I came in 21, saying that government should spend its way through. Government decided those who suffered loss of income, they should get the help straight away. For a free food for a very large population and plus direct support for those who were needy. But government never went for untargeted support kind of a thing. And we gain the benefit because recovery is without any high inflation in India, unlike in the advanced economies which followed that path and ended up with a high inflation.
The reason why these questions become important is because when you're looking even at what is there, this is just an interim budget, full budget will come later. But even if you're looking at the numbers in the interim budget, there are people who will be scratching their heads and saying, you're still continuing many of those welfare schemes. It's not that they're being discontinued. Ayushman Bharat is still there. A lot of that free food gain is still being provided. So welfare schemes are continuing. And you're having massive spending on infrastructure, 11 lakh crores. And defense spending obviously is there and will have to be required. Interest payments, unfortunately, are still there and are still at a very high number. And despite all of this, you're talking about fiscal deficit coming down to 5.1 or 4.5. Is there some magic in this? So would the answers to that be partly the technology that is being used and therefore formalization of the economy and therefore tax buoyancy? Or are there any other secrets?
Okay. There are neither any secret nor any magic, not magic in numbers. These are right decisions and having the clarity as to where we want to go. Getting the public finances right, bring a transparency, have the right estimates. Investing into broadening and deepening the tax base. Treating tax as a service. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but if the payment of tax itself is easier, the systems are in place, the way technology has been used for the GST. From e-way bills to e-invoices, easing up the systems there. And today we are talking about current year is going to be perhaps the first year where the combined tax to GDP ratio of Government of India and state government may cross 18%. It has never happened in India. So these are the investments which government has been doing by improving its system, formalizing the economy, and there the technology has played a big part. Second one, this is on the taxation, the revenue side. Second element is getting the expenditure priorities correct. Provide support who need the support. Not for all. Those who deserve or those who need, they should get it. Use the balanced fiscal space to put money into increasing the productive capacity of the economy, and there's where the infrastructure is coming. And it's not just about government expenditure. Equal focus is now being brought in by attracting private capital into infrastructure. And if you look at it here, successive it has changed. If you look at airports, ports, these are all private sector driven. Roads, we had a cycle wherein gone for a hybrid annuity, but 40%, 60% of the money comes from a private capital. They get paid over a period of time. Now, UP government, they did almost 29,000 crore highway, expressway through a PPP. So this is something wherein getting the expenditure priorities right, getting the taxation policies right, at the same time keep on investing into improving governance.
So if we just take that forward, now the government has done its part by, let's say, building this infrastructure. And the second thing which has happened is that the financial institutions do have the capacity now to lend money. What you now need is for the private sector to have the confidence and the animal spirits and the enthusiasm to say, we are going to invest and we are long-term, we bet in the Indian economy, we're willing to invest and we're going to come out and start spending. That then becomes presumably the next step, right, and part of the roadmap for the next 4 or 5 years.
In fact, that this finance minister has observed, and which is backed by data. 20 to 23, we sensed a bit of hesitation from private sector to make investments. 23, 24 is an entirely different story. And it is not just the large corporates, it is the MSMEs. Household of course covers both MSMEs and the housing sector per se. Housing sector, the construction sector, almost all elements, components of the economy, we are seeing good investments happening in those areas. So this is a different one, and that's how our finance minister has observed that now that the private sector is back to making investment, government borrowing less will leave enough credit for the private sector to find capital so that they can invest into the economy.
When I was earlier in the day speaking to many people in the private sector and said, are you going to be doing it? Are you going to be coming out and investing more? What will stop you? I think everyone is very confident on the direction of the Indian economy and very happy to go forward. We did hear some elements of unfinished agenda, which I guess the government will be pushing at some point, whether it is more ease of doing business, less harassment, quicker resolution, in the courts, for example, and not having cases that pen for 10, 15 years. Those are some of the items on the wish list which I guess they would do, which still need to be fixed. And then once that is done, then hopefully you'll get another wave of private investment-led growth.
There are several areas where more work is needed, and what the finance minister has observed that we have to get out of the paradigm of gross domestic product and look at governance, development and progress in each of those three blocks, and each one of them has an action to be done. And if we talk about in terms of performance, a very significant improvement, the way programs get formulated and implemented, or the projects get formulated and implemented with a speed, but a lot more is possible. Similar manner, development, very clear one. What is the outcome? Outlays are important, but bigger story is what are the outcomes? Focus on those elements. So there's a work is happening and a lot more work is needed. Governance, you touched upon some of those areas. Certainly, those are the areas for coming years to address each of those elements. And as far as private sector is concerned, you observed that kind of a thing. And what is the confidence level? Meaning that some of the cutting edge technologies, now I'm hearing some of the very large automobile companies investing into developing an India produced model on electric vehicles which can compete with the best in the world. And they are all lining up. They will do it in 24, they will do it in 25, coming out in the market and give a world class product to us. So this is not just production, but saying that we will develop an India product which can compete in the market. That's a confidence.
And I think that's one of the reasons why one of the most striking things about the interim budget was perhaps that 1 lakh crore rupees which was set aside for research and development. I wonder if you could share any more light on the thought behind that and how that works, because potentially you were just discussing the impact that technology has in enabling everything that's happening in India. Technology is only going to become more and more important in our lives in the next few years as AI happens and clean energy happens and all of these other biotech happens and technologies roll out. What is the thought process behind that fund and how do you see it actually being implemented?
Okay. So there has been a very significant application of technology to improve governance or how government interacts with the people or people interact with the government. Similar manner, private sector is also using the technology in heavy manner, how it serves its own customers, whether for on the good side or on the services side. But technology today has a potential to play a much bigger role. Just give an example of artificial intelligence. Do we want that Indian experience, Indian data to be used by a foreign company to build models for us, or we want those models to be done by Indians, Indian companies? Now that requires investment. Today, does the private sector, Indian private sector has that kind of a surplus capital to invest into research and innovation and developing a technology product for us, or they will require a long-term, low-cost funds? This is what this research and innovation fund or a corpus. So the idea is set up a corpus fund, fairly large in size, and that corpus, and government puts in 50-year interest-free money to that fund. And that corpus either finances or refinances long tenure, low cost or nil cost money to the private sector. So private sector still has to repay, and that tenure will depend on which areas the research and innovation is to be taken up. Like artificial intelligence, building models around artificial intelligence is a clearly one area, but that is stakeholder consultations is happening, and I'm confident that over a period of time we will.
So the private sector, when it is taking money from this fund, will it be getting low-cost funds, or will it be at market rates? So is it like a grant that will be given to people, or is it essentially just a source of funding?
No.
How does it work?
There's a difference. That and one, I'll request you to please note that point. There are two models. One, government gives grant. The second one, any financial, like it can be a venture capitalist who's saying that I'm going to put money, but at the end of the road, I want an equity in your company. That's not the model. Model is long-term, low-cost and nil-cost money for a definite period to be provided. It has to be repaid back after the model has become successful.
Right.
So this is in between the two. It is neither a grant nor an equity. It is a debt, but is a long tenure, low cost. So it is not at market rate.
The government's also been working, and I think you also reflected it, on getting a lot of external talent, other universities, foreign universities, to come in here and incubate technology. Presumably this is something that could also be used for that. Or that's where that level of expertise coming inside together with capital can start creating Indian companies that will be doing world-class technology more and more.
See, this is this is not meant per se at this point of time, that's my understanding, of a pure science-oriented research. It will be more applied research. Something which is can get translated, or it is where the more products and services can get generated rather than a pure science research. So it's not the universities per se, it will be more of a private sector driven, but it can as well be that a private company collaborates with an academic institutions and come out with a research. Is left to them that how they would like to take it forward.
Right. One of the other things that was a highlight, I think, in the interim budget, because obviously as growth continues, you've got to ensure that growth is adding to employment. And I think the economic review also, for example, speaks about the fact that with AI coming, it's possible that will there be an impact on the IT companies, on the sort of could other companies come in and start competing with them, that cost advantage that India had at some point. Is employment something that is a concern for you and will continue to be a concern?
See, employment will vanish as a concern, can never be a position. We are a large country and we have a potential for having our demographic dividend. So keep on having policies which generates enough jobs, but these are not jobs for the sake of jobs. We have to always, the two segments, that an orderly transition from agriculture to services or to the industrial sector, at the same time keep on moving up the value chain. If you just give the example, if you can take you back, say about 20 years back, India used to have BPO centers. Now we have global capacity centers, which are not just they are not the back offices. They are the ones which are developing products, which are developing services for other companies, and these are the high-tech people. They are doing the basic research. Similar manner, there are other applications of the technology where it's coming in. So it's always be an endeavor that those with a low skill are helped to get into a better skill through a reskilling, and those who are capable of a much higher capabilities, they keep on moving through the value chain.
There also seems to be a certain amount of focus on certain obvious areas where India could do very well, and which are also enormously employment generating. I mean, tourism comes to mind. And there was a very clear mention of tourism in the speech today. Also a clear signal on how the states can be motivated to come in and start becoming active partners in an even greater manner. And it's logical. India is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Enough tourism spots are there. Spiritual tourism is now also rising. So build that out as a potential area of growth, and growth which will also have massive employment potential.
Certainly, and there are two parts. One, of course, is leave alone foreigners coming and visiting India. Today, we have a fairly large middle class or even a low income class who would like the basic necessities are taken care. They would like to explore our own country. And the other one is what the budget is signaling is good connectivity, a comprehensive development, not just the branding, end-to-end services. So entire thing has to be taken care of. It's not like happening that we are reaching to a place is becoming a constraint. So all this has to be addressed, and we have to make beginning. If we can make a beginning with one such good center in each state, then many more flowers can bloom from there.
And if states compete in that's good competition, right? And as a whole, then it also adds up. One last question. When you're looking at the next few years and this aspiration to become 7 trillion by, let's say, 2030 or 2031 or whenever it happens, it's one thing when a country which is $1 trillion is growing at 6-7%, it adds that much. When you become a $4 trillion economy and you still grow at 6-7%, it's tougher to do. But if you're able to do it, then for every additional year that you do it, you'll actually see dramatic changes all around you because you're adding billions and billions of dollars to your economy every single year. How optimistic are you that we can do it for another 5 years, 10 years, 15 years?
Growing at that rate, I won't put it on a couple of years, 5 years, but growing at this rate for next 15 years, maybe 20 years.
At 7% plus, it's feasible?
If you were to take, I see it in this manner that at the moment global conditions are not very favorable. Growing at 7% plus or even 7.5% over next say decade, then growing at 7, but if you were to average it out over say next 2 decades, it's possible to keep it 6.5 to 7% average rate. Where it is coming up, we should appreciate that aspect. Of course, energy is going to be a big challenge for us. How do we handle that energy transition? There's a big if, I am putting it there. Not if in the sense of, do we have the capacity? We have the capacity. But the question is that is sticking on to that path. The moment the way our economy is growing, it increases capacity of the people in terms of savings, investing, and bettering their lives. It also increases their capacity to pay for user services. It also increases capacity of governments to take care of those who need help and also keep on investing into the economy. So we are in that phase wherein a very positive cycle can get generated. Once we hit maybe another 10 years, 15 years down the road, then we will get into position thereafter when we can keep on increasing our productivity, because moving forward, productivity increase is going to be an equal play as the more investments will be needed for us.
And of course, as your per capita income rises a certain level, you get a consumption cycle, a strong consumption cycle in areas like consumer discretionary and travel and other like, which will add to whatever's been happening from an infrastructure side.
Certainly.
But work will have to continue to be done, and more reforms presumably in the period ahead. What would you have on your mind on some of the major things that you think we should go on pushing for?
See, this budget makes 2 commitments, or rather several commitments. Say next generation reforms what is in the fold of Government of India itself. And among the several areas, if we can mention, with the budget again mentions about the MSMEs. It's not just about credit. How do we make those companies grow? How does a small company becomes a medium scale company? How does a medium scale becomes a big scale company? There are regulatory issues there. There are other ecosystem related issues are there. So big time reform, next generation reforms are needed. Plus a number of reforms are in the state government. So this budget again puts a mechanism by which the states can be incentivized, states can be supported to get those reforms. And these are each one of those elements may appear to be a small step, but all taken together, it means a sea change over a period of time.
All right. It sounds like exciting days lie ahead. So thank you so much for coming and talking to us here on Sansad TV and really helping people to understand some of the philosophy behind the interim budget and the roadmap ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We're going to slip into a break, but we'll be back very soon after that. Do stay with us.
What is